Good evening, everyone. We're so glad you're with us this evening. This is Three Secrets to Successful Parenting with Jay and Laura Laffoon. My name is Diane, and here's Jay and Laura. Hello, Jay. Hello, Laura.
Hello, hello.
Hi
How is
there.
everybody? We're going to do some testing here up front just so everybody gets comfortable with the webinar. And the first thing I would love for you to do, if you look at your GoToWebinar control panel, by your names there, you're going to see a little hand that you can hit. If you can see Laura and myself, would you just raise your hand by hitting that little hand button?
Janelle sees you.
Oh,
Regina
there we
sees
go.
you. Yay.
Abby, very good.
Yep.
So what about those of you that can't see us?
I'll put the hands down, and then anybody that cannot see Jay and Laura, raise your hand, and we'll explain a little how to do that. Oh, we do have a couple here, it looks like. Okay, so Jay and Laura are on their webcams, and on the top left-hand side of your GoToWebinar viewer, there's a place that says webcams. If you click on that, you can say hide or show. You don't want to show your own webcam, but you want to have the screen show the ones that are on there. And if you're in full screen mode, I don't think you can see their webcams. So hopefully that
Right,
will
so you have
help
to be
you
kind
out.
of in a half screen. Yep. So that's one thing we want to make sure everybody can see us, and we won't get started till you can see us because we love to make faces at you. Anyway, but the other thing I think we want to do, Diana, correct me if I'm wrong, is we want to make sure they can ask questions during the webinar. And so why don't we have them type where they're from in the question area, and I'll let you explain that a little better, Diane.
Sure. On your GoToWebinar control panel on that right-hand side, there's a box that says questions, and you can type a question in there. And yeah, let's see where everybody's from.
Bay City, Farmington Hills, Michigan, Ionia,
Ionia, North Valdez,
Valdez,
Valdez, South North Carolina, very
Valdez,
good.
North Carolina.
Farmington Hills, Grand Rapids, very good. Yep, Sevierville, Tennessee, or is it Sevierville?
Well, that's
Boiling
actually
Spring,
Regina
Tennessee.
telling you pronounced Valdez right, I think. So when she said yep. Mm-hmm.
Sevierville or
Spring.
Sevierville?
I think it's Sevierville.
Okay.
Laura, how
What
do you
second?
say that Pennsylvania one in your Atlanta accent?
Bowling Springs.
That's right.
Laura did, okay, very good, very good. So, Illinois, Watseka, Illinois, very good. All right, anybody else?
Cool.
Very
Very
cool.
cool.
Very good. Well, what we want to do
Woo.
as we go through this is we really want to answer your questions. We've got obviously some principles that we want to share with you. Go ahead and grab that PDF and take notes if you wish, but we really have principles that we want to share, but we know that many times you've got specific questions, and if we cannot answer those, we will help point you to someone who can answer them. So throughout this webinar, when you have a question, type it in that little question area there, and we will get to them. Diane will kind of moderate that, and we will get to them. So very good. Any questions up front? I know I've got one thing I need to explain, but any questions up front? Somebody want to give a shot?
Nope,
Well,
so keep talking.
some of you might be thinking, why are you two not together? Are you even in the same house? Are you even in the same state? Well, yes, we are in the same house. It's just with the GoTo meeting, we've got to have separate microphones at this point. That our technology is not quite there yet. We're getting close to that. But so Laura is down in our family room, and I am up in our home office, which is also, as you can see back there, our library. And we are in the same house, same state. We still do love each other. Most days we still even like each other, so that's a good thing. So we will go ahead and get rolling with this parenting webinar. So, here's one other question I would like to ask before we get started, and that is, can you guys just type in how many kids you have? Type in how many kids you have and maybe their ages, or just, like we got an 8 and 13-year-old, or we've got a 3 and 5-year-old, so we kind of know a little bit more about who we're talking to. So go for it. 2 kids, 8 and 3, okay. 2 precious girls, 3 and 5, 2 and 4,
Ooh,
I've got
five-year-old
five-year-old
twins.
twins. Woo-hoo! Three girls, one, three, and
Five-year-old twins
five.
and a 1-year-old. Okay.
And then we've got 18, 13, and 11. Okay. 2 and 11. Boy, 5, girl, almost 3. So we got a lot of young families here. And Jeffrey, as a Giotto, Gioto, 3 girls, 1, 3, and 5. Dude, I'll be praying for you for about the next 20 years. So 2 girls and a baby boy, 13-year-old. All right. Very good. Oh my goodness, here we go. 30, 27, 19, 16, and 13. Wow. Very good. Very good. So we've got quite the gamut.
Jeff
And
said thanks. Jeff said thanks that you're going to pray for him.
I bet. Yep. And bottom line is, too, my guess is that we've got maybe some blended families here. And so we want you to know that we're sensitive to your situation in blending a family and how it is very different. We are going to address that a little bit because Laura's sister and our brother-in-law live in a blended family, and they've done some things really, really well. And so we want to share that with you if you're in a blended family. So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to this parenting seminar. And we've got 3 secrets to successful parenting. And the first secret is goal setting. The goal, what is the goal of parenting? And we can state it very simply. The goal of parenting is to grow your children up and out of your house. That's 100% your goal, is to get them out of the house and to keep them out of the house, okay? Now, we understand that for some of you, you can't even think about that because your kids are so young, but even at ages 1 through 5, you are now training them to become lifelong learners and adults who are responsible. And so even the things that you do now will either add or detract from that goal of getting them to move out of the house. Now, a couple of things we want to touch on. Okay, if you've got more than one child, you realize that they are very, very different. I couldn't believe it when our daughter came out and was so much different than our son. When Tori was born, he was 7 when Grace came along, so we had been parenting him for quite a while, and we thought we had the perfect kid, or that we were the perfect parents. Just come to find out he was a very compliant kid. Then Grace came along, and the challenges began.
Then we realized we weren't very good parents at all.
We love her to death. She's wonderful. But your children are going to be very, very different, and they're going to be very different in the areas of discipline that you have to teach them. For example, and then I'll turn it over to Laura, our kids, when it comes to money, are very, very different. We raised them the same, we taught them the same, but they're very different. One never let a dime stay in his pocket. If he had a dime in his pocket, he was going to spend it no matter what. And our daughter is a saver. She's a very, 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 she doesn't like to spend money. She's like her dad. And so we had to treat them very differently as we raised them, as we taught them about budget and we taught them about money. So understand, your kids are going to be different. There's no cookie cutter way to do this parenting thing.
So part of, the goal is to raise them up so that they leave. While that's hard for us as parents, the goal is to raise them to be responsible adults. We're raising them up to be an adult, and that's our job as a parent, is to grow our children in such a way that they will be a responsible, contributing member of society when they leave our care. And so some of the ways that we've just done this that has worked for us, first of all, we started very young, teaching them how to budget in very small ways. When your children are really young, like we have a lot of young children here represented, putting jars in their bedroom that one says maybe church or Jesus, and one says savings, and one says fun. And so they can give them an allowance every week. We'll come back to why you would give them an allowance, but giving them an allowance every week in a way, maybe you give them 3 quarters and they put a quarter in each jar at this young age. And then as they get older, Grace has a savings account and she has a checking account, and she knows every time she gets a paycheck that there's certain amounts of money that goes into each of those things. And then she has a jar that she still keeps her Jesus money in, because she doesn't necessarily always give it to the church. She has a lot of different organizations that she likes to give that to. So, but again, teaching them in ways that are easy for them. And if you need ideas for this, I know I sound like a Pinterest person because I recommend Pinterest all the time, but Pinterest is a good place for moms especially to find some of these great ideas for teaching young children to budget.
And
Um,
if you're not on Pinterest, email us and we'll be glad to send
right.
you some links to some great ideas.
Right. Another thing that you want to start young is teaching them responsibility. I'll never forget when Tori was like 3 or 4 years old. I would do his laundry, I would fold his laundry, but then I would put it in his room, and he was responsible for putting it away. Now, he was 3 or 4 years old. How did he know where stuff went? Well, we took pictures and put it on his dresser. Here's where your underwear goes. It was a picture of underwear. Here's a picture of where your shorts and pants go. So he could do it. Now, yes, was I in there with him? Absolutely. But he was responsible for doing that. And so teaching them at a young age some of those responsibilities, and that's what they get the allowance for. Grace's job has always been she has to unload the dishwasher. That was one thing she always had to do. Both of our kids at different ages have had to, because in Michigan, when you go to buy soda or pop, as we call it here, you pay a 10-cent deposit. When you bring the empty bottle back, you get 10 cents back. And so both of our kids have been responsible for that at different times in their lives, for taking the pop cans back to the grocery store.
And that money goes
Putting them
towards
through the
helping
machine. Yeah.
our compassion children.
Yes, they put the money in the machine, they get the money back, and that goes towards supporting our compassion children. So again, teaching them responsibilities. Kids can dust. It's not going to be a beautiful job like mom would like it, but it's going to teach them what they have to do. And the main place to do that is in their own room. They have to keep their room cleaned, picked up, those types of things. So teaching them those responsibilities at a very young age. And then that also teaches them a work ethic, that everything in life isn't free.
Isn't given to them.
Yeah, I've had so many conversations with parents over the last couple of weeks about, my 12-year-old just expects everything given to her. And, or my son, he's got a phone and he's got a car, but he doesn't take care of it. And so really beginning to, and of course we have to work alongside them to teach them those things.
Yeah,
but
the
again,
earlier you can start, the better.
right, and the goal is to really work to raise them to be an adult in whatever, in our opinion, in that budget and the responsibilities and our work ethic. Also, one philosophy that we've always had with our children, and we've always communicated it to them, is that we are going to treat you older than you are. Now, do we always do that very well? No, we don't. Tonight, Jay was giving Grace a hard time because she wasn't eating her carrots at dinner, and she said, "What am I, 3 years old?" And, no, treat them older than they are until they give you a reason not to. But our kids have always stepped up to that challenge, and it's been great for us because we are on the road a lot, and to be able to know that our kids, if the house will be picked up most of the time, the dishes will be cleaned and taken care of most of the time when I come home from a road trip. So, but again, treating them older than they are, and they will step up to that challenge.
Yes, and so the final aspect of this number one goal of parenting has to do with discipline. And we did. Laura's right. We always treated our kids as if they were older than they were. We communicated to them that we want you to act more mature than maybe your friends do, because you can do this and you can take this responsibility, and they have stepped up to the plate. But discipline is critical, and you have to get on the same page. There is nothing more important in raising your kids than getting on the same page when it comes to discipline. And I learned this early with our son. When our son was a newborn, and he would cry, I would want to get him out of the bed. I would want to get him out of the bed because he's crying, right? Well, not Laura. No. She would say, is he dry? Yes. Is he fed? Yes. Then guess what? He's just wanting attention, and it's time for him to go to bed. He needs to cry. It drove me nuts. But you know what? She was right. All of his needs were met. All of his needs were met. We had been with him all day long. We had nurtured him all day long. It was now time for him to go to sleep. And so I had to get on Laura's page because she really understood that form of discipline better. The other, pardon me, you'll have to excuse me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. The other thing that Laura is excellent at that I have had to learn from her, the punishment fit the crime. If overreact, I want to set a very strict punishment so they'll never do it again. And Laura's question was always to me, does the punishment that you're wanting to give them fit the crime that they did? In other words, if they were 5 minutes late from their curfew, and the reason was because Joey's dad didn't pick them up when he said they were going to pick them up, is that really our child's fault? No. So I'm not going to ground them because Joey's dad made a mistake. We're going to talk to them about reiterating to Joey's dad that you have a curfew, but we're going to make the punishment fit the crime. So that's really the first secret, is that the goal of parenting is to get your kids out of the house. And to do this, you have to be on the same page. You have to treat them like they're older than they are, and give them the tools that an adult needs, even from a very young age, in budgeting, responsibility, and work ethic. So any questions about that? Any questions about the idea of the goal of parenting is to get these kids out of the house?
I don't see any right yet.
So it looks like we're all in agreement.
So that's
But
good.
that is-
Well,
that's
if you
the
think
goal.
of questions, again, you can type them out there in the little question box, but we'll move on. So the first secret is the goal of parenting is to raise your children to be adults and move on. The second secret is the priority of the parents. And the priority of the parents, hear me very carefully, the priority of the parents is not your children. The priority of the parents is your marital relationship. That is the best thing you can do for your kids, is to let your kids know that your spouse and your marriage is a higher priority than they are. And while that sounds so harsh, and so especially when they're 1 and 2 and they can't take care of themselves, there's still a time and a place for you to put your spouse before your kids. One of the philosophies Jay was sharing with you, that I was much better at letting the babies cry in the crib, and that was because I had babysat for mostly one family my entire teenage years, and the mother taught me that you don't let your children don't control your life. You control their life. You're inviting them into your life. They're not inviting you into theirs. And that was really a flaw. That was why, if he's dry, he's fed, he's clean, then we can let him cry for 10 minutes, and then we'll go in and pat him on the back. Then we'll let him cry for 10 more minutes, and it only took about a week before he was sleeping through the night. So again, really establishing those boundaries, that the priority is you and your spouse, not the child.
This really became clear to me a number of years ago. I was teaching in an FCA golf camp, Fellowship of Christian Athletes golf camp, and the golf pro was sharing, he taught a bunker lesson, and then he gave his testimony. Now, it's not a golf pro you've ever heard of. His name's Joe, but he was there helping the kids, and he said, I want to tell you my priorities. And he held up his hand like this, and he said, my priorities are my relationship with Jesus, my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my kids, my ministry, and my job. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Because I think if you ask most Christians what their priorities are, they're going to say it this way: my relationship with God, my family, my ministry, my job. And what most Christians do, where they make the big mistake, is they lump their kids in with their spouse. And why is this a big mistake? Because there's no biblical reference for this, okay? You are to train up your kids in the way they are supposed to go. But you are making a lifelong commitment to your spouse. So your spouse has to hold that priority position over your kids. And it is very, very difficult, but it is very fruitful when you do. When you can get your kids understanding that mom is more important than you are, or dad is more important than you are. This is what it's study after study shows. University of Chicago, University of Minnesota. These are not Christian universities. These are secular universities. Show that when kids know mom and dad are in love, they feel more secure. They do better in school. They have fewer psychological and emotional issues. So the best thing you can do for your kids is to make each other a priority. Now, how do you do that? I'm going to share 2 ways with you. The first one, we just want you to write down these 4 letters, G-A-G-A, Gaga, we call it. And it's
we're not talking about lady either. Not
right.
lady.
No, we're not talking about lady. It's get away and get ahead. Make time to get away with your spouse and get ahead. Yes, it costs money. Yes, it costs time. Yes, it costs you energy to think about getting everything around together. But let me tell you this. The average cost of marital therapy is $100 a session. $100 a session times 52 weeks of the year is $5,000. You can get away and get ahead for a lot less than that, have a lot more fun, and build into your marriage.
Well,
So the
and
first
getting
one,
away and getting ahead isn't just necessarily going away for a weekend. It's getting away
on a regular date.
from the kids. It's getting away from the normal, it could just be you put the kids in bed and you get I'm mixing up Netflix and Redbox. Watch Netflix or Redbox, but it's that time that you two are getting away from everything else around you and just focusing on the two of you. So that's the getting away part. And if you get away, you'll get ahead. Yes, do we think that you should do something for your marriage on a regular basis as far as, get away to a marriage enrichment thing? Absolutely. But on a regular basis, say once a week, there needs to be a getting away that's getting away to focus on the two of you in whatever realm that might be, a walk, a dinner, a movie, whatever that might be.
Well, and a very simple way to do this is to put the kids to bed, get them to bed. Maybe you haven't gotten in the habit yet of getting kids to bed early, but thankfully that was one of Laura's priorities. Our kids were in bed at 7:30, 8 o'clock every night, which meant that she and I had 2 or 3 hours of just us time. And I cannot emphasize enough, number one, that sleep is important for your children, okay? It's important for their health, their mental stability, their mental growth, their emotional health, all of that stuff, but it's important for you. And yes, I know it's a hassle. Sometimes they don't want to go down for bed, but the more you work at it, the more you will get them into the routine that this is time to go to bed. And it gives you an opportunity to connect as a couple. Even in high school, and our daughter's a senior in high school, we have a rule in our house that you have to be in your room at 10 o'clock at night. You don't have to go to sleep. You can be listening to music, you can do homework, you can do whatever you want, but you're in your room at 10 o'clock because Mom and I need at least an hour by ourselves. I'll never forget when our son was 16, he would, I'd say, buddy, it's 10 o'clock. Well, I'm not tired. Sorry, bud. Well, I want to watch TV with you and Mom. I would simply go, bow, chicken, bow, bow, and let him know that Mom and Dad were going to have some intimate time, and he would scoot up out of the chair and up the stairs to bed.
Now before you think that we had intimate time every night, no, we didn't.
In my mind,
getting the kid upstairs.
And that was just the way. And it's interesting because I know it's hard to make time for each other. And I know that you get on different clocks, and with your work schedules, you're on different clocks. We were just teaching a seminar in this last weekend near Milwaukee. Can you say the name of the town, honey? Oconomowoc. Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. And
right.
And this one woman asked the question. She's like, my husband, he's always coming after me at midnight or 1 o'clock. I'm exhausted. I get up at 5 in the morning. And I said to her, what time do you put the kids to bed? She said 7:30. And the lady sitting behind her said, hey, honey, let your husband know what kind of time he can have at 9 o'clock. He'll get the hint after a couple of opportunities. So you got to work at creating this schedule that allows you two to have time together. So number one is you've got a parent to get them out of the house. Number two, the second secret is keeping your spouse a priority. So are there any questions about that? Any questions about keeping your spouse a priority? Boy, when we had the sex one, honey, they asked questions all the time.
That was the money one too, huh?
And the money one too.
Yeah.
Well, we will give a little time at the end too to answer some questions, but we'll move on to the third secret. And the third secret is that teamwork is the best parenting strategy, operating as a team. And a few, Jay has already stated, get on the same page as a couple. And what this is going to take is you and your spouse discussing different parenting issues and coming to an agreement together. Because the worst thing you can do is discuss this in front of the kids. For example, say your teenager comes in 45 minutes late and his broke curfew. Make sure they know they were wrong. Make sure that there will be, that there's communicated there will be punishment, but we will dole out that punishment tomorrow because it's already late at night and you and your spouse need time to discuss it. Plus, it makes them kind of wiggle a little bit all night long, wondering what's going to happen to them. But again, even, I can remember my mom growing up. My mom always said, "You just wait till your dad gets home," and that made me fear my dad and not fear my mom. And really, I think we have really tried over the life of our kids to, what, your mom and I are going to discuss what your punishment is. Now, there are times in the middle of the day, if you're home with your child, whether it's mom or dad, and you're home with a child and they do something that's, right out there,
And needs immediate action.
Gotta do immediate consequences, but knowing what those already are as a couple, knowing what your consequences are going to be in certain situations and agreeing on them and staying on the same page, that really is operating as a team. Another way that we operated as a team, and we didn't always do this perfectly,
No.
but we really tried to keep our kids to one extracurricular activity a season. Dance may last all year long, soccer lasts for a short amount of time. But when you only are allowing each child to have one activity a season, it helps keep you and your spouse together. It helps keep you and your spouse a priority, because when you've got 4 children and they're all on 4 different activities, that's a lot of running around at night. There's not going to be any room for you and your spouse to have some time together. So really keeping that on the same page. My sister and her husband, who had both been married before, he brought 2 kids into the marriage. She brought 1, and then they have 1 together. We were asking them over Christmas, what are some ways that you guys have
very successful blending of the family. They've done a great job
of step family. And one of the things I said, so what is something that you guys have really done that has been successful? And they both said, we always, when one of the kids did something wrong, we discussed it and came back and together meted out the punishment. We didn't say, "Oh, that's your kid, you go punish him. Oh, that's your kid, you go punish him." Nope. They did it together, which is exactly what we're talking about. But the significance of that in a blended family is huge, because then the kids realize, oh, this isn't him punishing me or her punishing me, or you're not my mom or you're not my dad, but really together as a team operating. And that has been hugely successful. I think that's been a huge success for them in the mixing of their kids together, and really making that step family work. So
and this goes back,
is huge.
Right, and this goes back to point number 2 in keeping your marriage a priority. If you guys are on the same page with this discipline, if you guys are on this, are a team, because you've talked about how you're going to raise your kids, you've talked about how you're going to discipline them, then you really are making your marriage a priority, and your kids see that because you present a unified front. Now, for those of you who are not on the same team, you're not on the same page when it comes to parenting strategy, what do? Well, there's a big word out there, and it's one that we have to use. It's called compromise. It's called compromise. And Laura and I have had to work through a lot of compromise over the years in raising our kids, because she was raised in the Deep South. I was raised in northern Michigan. Laura's family, pretty laid back. My family, pretty uptight. And so we've had to balance that. And I think, thankfully, we have. And we haven't lost any of the discipline that I feel like my family had. But we're not this strict 100% by the rules family either, because Laura's shown me that, guess what, flexibility can really help a family. So working that out together, becoming a team, is hugely important. So any questions about teamwork?
Or any of what we have presented.
We do have a question from Danielle. Laura, do you want to read her question?
Yep. My husband is never in my corner when correcting our children. He constantly tells me that I am too hard on them, and I may mess this up, so I'm trying to figure out how I'm supposed to read this. Too hard on them and am mean to them in front of them. Now they won't listen to me and think that what I say doesn't matter. How do I see the rest of the question, Diane?
Just scroll down with your mouse. Can you do your mouse over it?
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Now they won't listen to me, and they think what I say doesn't matter. How can I make him understand this is important to me for him not to do that? So let me just do this again, since I butchered the question. My husband is never in my corner when correcting our children. He constantly tells me I'm too hard on them and I'm mean to them in front of them. Now they won't listen to me and think what I say doesn't matter. How can I make him understand this is important for me, for him not to do that?
It's a great question.
It really is, and really, it's what I feel like sometimes seems to be our answer to everything, but it really is you have to communicate it to him. And again, not in the midst of a heated argument
Or
or
in
in the
front of the
midst of
kids.
correcting children or in front of the children, but at a separate time, really saying, here, here's a phrase that Jay and I have come to use quite often. Do you know how it makes me feel when you? And so when there's a situation again and he isn't in your corner with correcting
Let me give you the
children.
example of that. Do you know how it makes me feel when we're in front of the kids and you tell me I'm too harsh? And then just don't do this in front of the kids, but do this separately. Do you know how it makes me feel when we're in front of the kids and you tell me I'm too harsh on them? And then be quiet and let him answer, because he'll give one of two answers. Either, yep, I know how it makes you feel, and then you've got to deal with that issue, or he'll say, no, I don't, and you can tell him how it makes you feel.
And also in this particular situation with your children, Danielle, I'm not sure how old your kids are. I'm not very adept at going back up and looking. But saying to your husband, here's what I think we need to do. I may be too harsh. I may mete out consequences that aren't that don't meet with the punishment. You could be right. I feel like some of the time I'm right. So maybe we should come to an agreement on what are some of the things that continue to happen over and over again, and what would be a good punishment. I know for me, when our kids were young, I was the screamer. I screamed a lot. Jay would always say, "You are just screaming at him all the time. You're never going to get anywhere with him if you're just screaming all the time." So I really had to learn to count to 10, sit down, and quietly, eyeball to eyeball, to the kids say, "Okay, here's what needs to happen." But I didn't do that very well at first. I would say it wasn't until Grace maybe got into late junior high or early high school that I really started accomplishing it on a regular basis. But he couldn't tell me that in the midst of an argument. It had to come at a more quiet time when we weren't in the middle of something. He was just, here's something I want to help you see. You feel like the kids don't listen to you, it's because you scream at them. Take it down a couple octaves and they'll listen. And it did, and it worked. But I had to admit that maybe I was, mean or screaming at them, and I began to catch myself. Oh my gosh, I'm just screaming about at the top of my lungs. But so some of that give and take too,
Right.
of, you know what, I may be mean, but we've got to come to some agreement on what is fair to us as
Right.
parents and to the kids as our children.
And interestingly enough, that was just the opposite in our house, because I was the one that was dealing out punishment that Laura thought was too mean. And so we did have to sit down and discuss what we thought was fair. I grew up in a house. My father was a minister who was in the military. Okay, so that tells you a lot about the house I grew up in, and it was very different from the house that Laura grew up in. And so we did have to blend and come to an agreement, and we had to communicate about that. So Danielle, I would really encourage you to talk to your husband about that and say, what is fair? Number one, do you know how it makes me feel? Number two, help me understand what you think is fair, and then get his point of view as to what he thinks is fair. Great question.
It looks like Regina is saying the same thing. I'm not sure what the tough area is. Tough area for me to remember when, Jay told me, you're screaming at him all the time, and I'm like, well, you're not with them all day long. You don't know how awful they can be. Well, you don't know how disrespectful or how naughty or whatever. And then when I started listening to myself, I just really tried to say, okay, Laura, maybe try to listen to the way you're reacting to your kids. And when I realized that I really was, because my mom was a screamer, it came right down through the bloodline. And so I knew exactly what he was saying. I just didn't want to admit it. And yes, I did feel awful, but you know what? You're not an awful mom. You're just trying to navigate this thing with young kids. And when they hit adolescence, it's a whole different ball game. And then when they hit their teenage years, it's even a whole different ball game. And so it really is just trying to be self-aware of how you do react to them in certain situations.
And I'm not trying to pass judgment here by any stretch of the imagination, but I've been married 30 years, and I understand that over the course of a month, my wife's emotions can vary greatly. So, ask your husband and trust him. Am I overreacting in this situation because, of my hormones? And if
And
he
it may
says
be that
yes,
you, right. It
you
may
got
be
to
that you
trust him.
are overreacting, but it could also be that your spouse is too lenient. I mean,
Right.
I don't want to put all the blame on the woman saying that
Nope.
we are overreacting, because it could be that they're too lenient. And I'm
Because
seeing
Laura
here
was
that
way too
Regina,
lenient.
you are a stay-at-home mom, and through the course of a day, there's so much that's going on. And so, but again, it may be that that the spouse is too lenient, or it could be that we're overreacting. It could be a mixture of both. And so again, that's why it's important to operate as a team and to get on that same page together.
Great questions. Any other questions? So I want to share with any tips on how to, here we go, any tips on how to teach our children, 5-year-olds, how to value and take care of their things. They are rough with the toys, etc., and don't always take care, even when we ask 2 or 3 times. Taking care of their things is one of those life skills they'll need when they leave the house. Preach it, preach it, preach it. Yes, this is
If they can't take care of it,
well,
they
we had a
lose it.
fifth, right. That was
That's,
really kind of how that was the
if
standard we had.
and you know, this is such a hard thing in this day and age, especially with kids as parents, we give them so much, and we want to give them so much, and we want them to have all the good stuff and the best stuff, and when they reach adolescence and teenage years, we wanted to make sure they have a phone so that we can stay in touch and all this, but we've got to make sure that they understand that this costs something. And I can
And we're
remember.
supposed to be good stewards.
Right. I can remember, and I have a friend, when her kids were young, we were in a women's Bible study together. Her kids never got new toys until Christmas every year. And I was like, "Oh, what? You've got to be joking. You don't buy your kids things during the year?" And she's like, "No. At Christmas they get new toys every year." And she would box them up. Sometimes she would box up the old toys and put them away, and she'd bring those out during the middle of the year. But they learned the value of, this is something special, rather than getting something every time mom went to the grocery store, which is what happened to my kids. And so really, and I would say if they're not valuing it, or they leave it out, I can remember Tori leaving Legos everywhere.
And we hide them.
We would box them up, hide them. When they got older and they left their car keys where they weren't supposed to be, or their phone where it wasn't supposed to be, they got hidden. And sometimes they would take them.
Oh, yeah.
I just realized I missed my phone. Where's my phone?
Right. I remember we got Grace. I think Grace wanted for her 13th birthday, an iPhone, because everybody has one. And we said, fine, we bought you a case. She didn't want to use the case. And our little Miss Grace is not all that graceful at times, and she would drop her phone constantly. And I would say to her constantly, if your phone's going to break and you're going to be without a phone, I'm fine, I'm fine. Well, sure enough, she dropped her phone one too many times, and the front part cracked. There was just huge cracks all in this. She's like, I need a new phone. I said, no, you needed to take care of the phone that you had, and you didn't. So here are your options. You can either buy a new phone for yourself, which at that time I think they were like $400. You can pay to have the screen replaced, which at that time was $200, or you can wait till your contract runs out and get a new phone then. And I gave her the options, and I think that's what we need to do as parents when they're not taking care of things, is give them the options of, okay, here are mom and dad's options for you when it comes to this toy or these things, because you're not treating them with respect. And Grace chose option number 3. She lived with a damaged phone for almost 2 years because she didn't want to shell out the money. And
or work for the money. She didn't want to work for the money.
And surprisingly, with her new phone, she uses a case. It's amazing. Here's a great question, Lauren. I'm going to let you handle this one.
Yes. Should bedtime be the same on non-school days? And then how to start weaning from laying with a child at night until they are sleeping. So 2 different questions. Should bedtime be the same on non-school days? During the school year, I would say yes, just because getting them out of the habit of a school night routine. Now, during the summer, our kids had different bedtimes. They had to come in when it got dark, and then they had 30 to 45 minutes in the house, so anywhere from 9:30 to 10:30, they had to be in their bedrooms again. But in the summertime, we wanted them to be outside, playing outside as long as they could, because we live in Michigan, and winter is long and summer is short. So my first instinct is to say, if it's a non-school day, tomorrow's a holiday, maybe let them stay up 30 minutes longer, but don't do a couple hours, because then you get out of the whole school routine and it just messes everything up. How to start weaning from laying with a child at night till they're sleeping. I would use the same concept that I used when our children were younger, that you need to stay in your own bed. They're fed, they're bathed, they've got pajamas on. Maybe let them have a book to read. They can read a book. I know our daughter listened to Adventures in Odyssey, I think, until she was probably 13 years old every night. That was played in her room. That soothed her, that gave her a story to listen to, and we didn't have to be in there with her. And so, it's going to be hard depending on how old they are, but they need to learn to go to sleep by themselves.
And I would say that there's probably a number of different techniques that you could use, and because your question was how to start weaning from laying with a child at night, I would just Google that and look at different trusted experts in child rearing and find out a technique that you're comfortable with. We've got one good question.
That clarifies it. Jessica that asked the question, her daughter is 4. And so if that's the child that you're still laying with at night, she needs to learn to go to sleep on her own. But again, like with our daughter, she loved it once she got to listen to Adventures in Odyssey. It was like, how fast can mom and dad get out of the room? And
right.
So maybe something like that's good for her. It's going to give her a good thought as she's going to sleep. That might be a good way to go to that.
Great question here. When is a good age to get a cell phone for your child? And the answer is, drum roll, it depends on the child. It really does. When they can be responsible for it, when they can treat it as they should. Our kids got cell phones very, very early because mom and dad traveled, and we wanted them to have access to us. Even though they're at grandma's, even though grandma has a cell phone, we wanted them to know that they could call us anytime. So
and they had it for an emergency, and it wasn't the top of the line cell phone. It was,
very cheap cell phone. And so that it really does vary from child to child. Some children might not be able to handle it till they're in their teens. Others might be able to handle it at 10. But
again, if you're giving your child a cell phone, and I'm sure that you all know this, please, when you get that cell phone, they get all of the education they need for what the cell phone is used for and what it's not used for. And you need the passwords to everything they have on their cell phone. It's your cell phone that you're letting them have because you've purchased it. You're paying for the plan. But there's so much that can happen out there with a cell phone, But again, our kids got them early. But my first inclination is make it a rite of passage. Maybe when they turn 12 or 13, then you get. That's what we did with Facebook. Our kids couldn't have a Facebook page until they were 13. Now they're not even on Facebook anymore. But it was a rite of passage. So maybe
right.
that kind of.
And that went with 2 other good questions. When's a good age for a tablet, and what about Facebook? And again, I think those go with the same idea. It depends on the child, and that really is up to you. We've got one more question here, and then we're probably going to need to wrap it up. My young men are 25, 24, and 21. They do not live with us, but when they are here, they will not put their cell phones away. They are constantly on them. How do we set boundaries that they cannot be on their cell phone in our home? We want to have conversations with them, not just look at them. Great
one
question.
Of those. We have a 24-year-old and it's always been the rule, no cell phones at the table. And he will still, he perfected the art at 16 of, typing down here while he thinks that we're not paying any attention. And still to this day, when they come in and have dinner at our house, there's no cell phones at the table. What's really bad is when you have to tell Grandma she can't have her cell phone at the table.
That's when it's really a hassle. Is when Grandma will put her cell phone away.
But that's where we start.
But to answer
Go ahead.
To answer your question specifically, here's the interesting thing about boundaries, and you're hitting it correct. You've got to set boundaries, but when you set them, you've got to be willing to live by them. And so if you say no cell phones in the house, you've got to be prepared for them to say, well, then I'm not coming over. So that's a conversation you've got to have with your boys individually, is here's how it makes us feel when you're on your cell phones while you're here. And maybe start with that conversation, because it really is a difficult conversation. They're adults, but they're in your house. And so, again, this whole boundaries thing is very, very difficult when you're dealing adult to adult. And you've got to be prepared to not only set the boundaries, but once you do set them, live with them. So I have a question for you, or a statement. Laura and I are soon to be empty nesters. We're looking forward to it, but we are scared to death. But being a good parent is not determined by how well your kids turn out. Okay? Being a good parent is not determined by how well your kids turn out. No, being a good parent is dependent on how good your grandkids turn out. How good your grandkids turn out, because that tells you how well you parented your kids so that they could pass along the legacy to their children as well. And so that really is something that we'd like to kind of put in your minds, is that you're preparing your kids to be parents. Does that make sense? So you want to give them skills, responsibilities, educate them, teach them what it means to be an adult, a responsible adult in this world, and that starts when they're 1 year old. As soon as they come out of the womb, they're being taught how to be a responsible adult. So being a good parent isn't about how good your kids turn out. It's about how good your grandkids turn out, because that means you've been able to pass the legacy along. Well, we've got some exciting things coming up we want to tell you about really quickly before we cut you loose. And Diane, you want to throw that next slide up? We are right now having registration for our online program entitled Discover the Secrets of Living the Married Life. And Laura and I have put together a lot of great content, and we have put it together online. It's an online, on-demand, watch it when you want to, class. But I hate to say class because our style is so not a class. But anyway, that is coming up. Registration is now open, and we have a couple of different ways that you can go with it. There is a regular registration. It's 4 weeks. And it's for a number of different people. The regular registration is great. It's all of our content. You can see right here it's for young couples who are looking to build a solid foundation in their marriage. For couples who've grown apart. Maybe you've let life, because of this parenting thing, maybe you've drifted apart a little bit, and we want to help you reconnect. Communication issues. It sounds like some of you may have communication issues, and we will help you get on the same page. And then, most of all, it's for couples who know that deep down, you know that your marriage can be great. So you can go to livingthemarriedlife.org and sign up for that. Laura,
we're going to talk about a couple. Yep, we got a couple different modules. It's gonna, like Jay said, this will be an on-demand class, for lack of a better word. So you can watch it in your own convenience and your own schedule, and you and your spouse can watch it together. We're going to talk about 8 different ways that a couple needs to communicate. We are going to go back to that gaga that we talked about tonight, but the secret to getting away and getting ahead, and how it can reinvigorate your love. We're also going to have a module on teaching you how to say the 2 most important words in the human language, yes and no, and how that will really focus your marriage and focus you as a couple and a family about what you want to do, the path that you want to take, and how that really affects everything in your marriage. And then last but not least, we will talk about intimacy and how important it is to connect in a physical way in your marriage, but also in an emotional way. So
well, and just want to clarify here too that the program also includes you guys interacting throughout their class time with answers to questions that are posted, questions that are submitted. So yes.
And here's another cool thing, Diane. Thanks for bringing that up. Is that when we do these online classes, it's almost like a little marriage community, and people help answer other people's questions. For example, we've got Janelle answered the question about the cell phones. She says, we put a basket at the door, and when my nephews come over, they have to drop their phones in the basket when they come in, and they can pick them up when they leave. It's a great idea, Janelle. So yes, we have two. Sorry, I didn't mean. I just thought that was kind of cool because that's what we do here. Is we help each other out.
That's
You know, it's
right.
not always Jay and Laura. It's other people in the community. So didn't mean to do that. But we have two different levels that you can join. The first level is just regular registration, and it's $49 for the 4-week class where we're going to answer every one of your questions on all of those different areas. And then you can go premium. And the premium membership is $99, but it gets you access to a whole lot more. We are going to take, excuse me, honey, would you handle this?
I will. The premium members are going to, after our 4-week of living the married life, where we're going to have 4 different modules, 4 weeks in a row, again, that you get to watch on demand, ask questions, we'll interact with you, we'll answer your questions. But then the premium members, when that 4 weeks is done, we're going to have you via email submit to us 3 areas of concern that you have in your marriage, and then we will take specific steps and outline them for you, and then we will do some Skype calls with you, and we'll ask for your concerns, we'll make you a roadmap, we'll send it back to you, we'll have some conversation about it, and then in about a 30-day period, we will do Skype calls to help you really understand that roadmap, questions you might have, what it might look like, and really answer those concerns in the technology love face-to-face way that we can do that now thanks to computers.
Yes, and thank you for, I apologize for my little coughing fit there, and thank you, Laura, for handling that. So,
no problem.
So that is Living the Married Life. The registration's open. We would love to have you join us for the next 4 weeks because it's going to be an exciting time and marriages are going to be changed. Well, you guys have been absolutely wonderful. Appreciate all the interaction, and we'll look forward to seeing you very soon, either at a live event or online with Jay and Laura. God bless you all. Oh, yeah. Here's the deal. Go to Facebook. Ask us questions on Facebook. We might answer them on our TV show. We're always answering questions that people give us on Facebook on our TV show. So have at it.
Good night.
Good night.